The morning sun cast a golden glow over the quiet cul-de-sac of Westridge Estates, where Elena Cruz had recently moved with her husband and their newborn daughter. It was supposed to be a peaceful neighborhood, clean, gated community where neighbors smiled, lawns were trimmed, and everything felt just structured enough to be safe. Elena, a former Navy SEAL turned full-time mom, appreciated that sense of order. She had experienced too much chaos in her past life to want anything less for her baby now. But that illusion of safety cracked the moment 3 black SUVs rolled into the neighborhood just after sunrise. The vehicles had tinted windows and large, magnetic decals on the sides that read HOA Security Division. That was the first red flag. Elena had reviewed the HOA bylaws meticulously when they bought the house. Nowhere had it mentioned a private security division, let alone one with armed officers. Men in tactical vests stepped out, their attire more resembling SWAT gear than any kind of neighborhood security. They wore black hats with embroidered HOA enforcement logos, and 2 of them carried radios and sidearms. One even wore mirrored aviator sunglasses and walked with the swagger of authority. As they fanned out through the community, they began inspecting homes, peeking over fences, and tapping on car windows like they were conducting a raid. Elena stood on her front porch, rocking her daughter gently in her arms, watching it all unfold with narrowed eyes. She wasn't the type to panic easily, but she was trained to notice details. The badges looked cheap. The radios weren't transmitting anything real, just static. And the way they moved? Sloppy, not tactical at all. Something was very wrong. She approached the men calmly, cradling her child, and asked who had authorized their presence. One of them turned to her, barely glancing at the baby, and muttered, "Just doing routine HOA compliance checks, ma'am. Best not to interfere." Another chimed in, "New regulations. We're enforcing community standards more strictly now." Elena didn't buy it. She made mental notes of the license plates and facial features. As they moved on, she went inside and called the HOA office directly. No one answered. Then she sent an email. Still nothing. The neighborhood, once quiet and clean, now felt watched, occupied by strangers claiming authority that didn't exist. And Elena knew in her gut this was just the beginning. Over the next several days, the presence of the so-called HOA security became more intrusive. The black SUVs began making rounds every morning and evening, sometimes parking for hours at random intersections. Their officers walked around with clipboards, snapping photos of minor infractions, trash bins left out 5 minutes past pickup time, a basketball hoop near the curb, a welcome mat they deemed unapproved. Every household began receiving printed notices stuffed into their mailboxes, stamped with an official-looking seal and listing absurd fines, ranging from $50 to $500. Elena Cruz wasn't the only one who noticed something was off, but she was one of a few who took it seriously. Her neighbor, Mrs. Blanchard, a kind elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade, confided that she had been fined $150 for having a potted plant too close to the walkway. Another neighbor, Jason, a young father of 3, said one of the officers yelled at his kids for using sidewalk chalk, calling it unauthorized marking of community property. As a former Navy SEAL, Elena had seen operations with real authority, and this wasn't it. The behavior was erratic, overly aggressive, and without any due process. And yet, some residents, fearful or unaware of their rights, began paying the fines and avoiding confrontation. That's when Elena decided to dig deeper. She went through the HOA handbook line by line again. Nowhere did it authorize private enforcement, patrols, let alone the issuing of fines without proper hearing. When she called the HOA board's main number again, it went straight to voicemail. She left a detailed message, then followed up with an email outlining her concerns, attaching pictures of the SUVs and the men. Still no reply. Elena's instincts told her this wasn't just overreach, it was a full-blown scam hiding behind a fake authority. She mentioned it to her husband, who suggested contacting the sheriff's department, but Elena wanted more evidence first. If this was an organized group pretending to be an official HOA enforcement unit, then the community could be in danger. And if anyone was going to protect her child and her neighbors, it would have to start with her. That evening, as the fake officers patrolled again, Elena stayed in the shadows, phone in hand, camera rolling. They were too confident, too careless. They thought no one was watching. But Elena was, and she wasn't going to let them get away with it. It was a bright Thursday morning when everything escalated beyond what anyone could have imagined. Elena strapped her 2-month-old daughter into the stroller for their usual morning walk. The air was fresh, the sky clear, and the neighborhood seemed unusually quiet, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. She moved along the sidewalk near the parkway, staying alert as always. Despite the calm appearance, her gut told her something was brewing. As she approached the corner near the community clubhouse, one of the black SUVs rolled up slowly and stopped mid-intersection. Elena glanced over casually, noting 2 of the so-called HOA security men inside. They stared back at her, not bothering to hide their scrutiny. Then the driver's side door opened, and one of the men, stocky, heavily tattooed, with a smug expression, stepped out. He called out to her, "Ma'am, you're not authorized to walk strollers on this pathway during peak hours. That's a safety violation." Elena stopped cold. "Excuse me?" she replied, keeping her tone calm though. Her eyes sharpened. "It's posted in the updated HOA guidelines," he snapped, pulling out a laminated sheet and waving it. "We're going to have to issue you a citation." Elena glanced around. No signs, no witnesses. Just the 2 of them and her child. "I don't recognize your authority," she said firmly. "You're not HOA, and I suggest you stay back." But the man only smirked and nodded to the SUV. That's when the back door swung open. From a large kennel crate, 2 muscular pit bulls, muzzled but clearly agitated, were let out by a second officer holding the leashes loosely, almost lazily. "They're just for security," he said mockingly. "We've had reports of suspicious walkers lately." Elena's heart began pounding, but not from fear. Her training was kicking in. She stepped slightly in front of the stroller and let her right hand fall near her hip, where her concealed carry holster rested. Her permit was valid. Her instincts were sharper than ever. The dogs growled, pulling at their leashes, their handler not even pretending to restrain them. Then, in a horrifying instant, the handler let go. The pit bulls lunged forward, teeth bared, making a beeline for the stroller. Elena didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, she drew her firearm and fired a single warning shot into the grass, angled down and away. The sharp crack echoed. The dogs skidded to a halt, startled. The men froze. Elena's voice rang out, calm but lethal. "One more step and you'll regret it." The silence that followed Elena's warning shot was heavier than any battlefield she had ever stepped onto. The pit bulls, startled and confused, backed away with low growls, their aggression immediately tempered by the sudden blast. The 2 fake HOA officers, no longer smug or confident, now stood frozen, clearly not expecting. A mother, especially one pushing a stroller, to be armed, calm, and composed under pressure. Elena didn't lower her weapon. She stood her ground between her baby and the threat, her breathing steady, her mind calculating. "Hands where I can see them," she commanded, eyes locked on the man who had released the dogs. Now, the men raised their hands halfway, stammering excuses. "It was just a misunderstanding," one muttered. "We didn't mean—" "Save it," Elena cut in coldly. "Step back slowly and lie down on the ground. You endangered a child and impersonated law enforcement. This ends now." But instead of complying, the men bolted. They dove into their SUV and sped off, tires screeching, leaving behind the dogs still trembling, their ferocity now fear. Elena took out her phone and immediately called 911, reporting the attack, the impersonation, and the attempted assault with dogs. Then she turned her camera on the dogs, capturing evidence, and quickly rolled her daughter's stroller back home, locking every door as she waited for help. Within the hour, police cruisers swarmed the neighborhood. Elena provided full descriptions, video footage, and even the partial license plate number she'd memorized. The responding officers were stunned, not just by her story but by the sheer boldness of the act. A quick check confirmed her suspicion. There was no such thing as an HOA security division. The men were imposters running a sophisticated scam, targeting residents with fake fines and intimidation to extort money, and now their operation had crossed into criminal violence. That same evening, a joint task force from local law enforcement and a federal agency arrived at Westridge Estates. Elena's footage and reports sparked an immediate investigation, uncovering that the group had been operating in multiple neighborhoods across the state. Several arrests were made within days. Elena, the soft-spoken new mom, was quietly hailed as a hero, but to her, it wasn't heroism, it was instinct. She hadn't fought for her country to come home and be bullied by cowards hiding behind fake authority. She had protected what mattered most. And now, her neighborhood was finally safe again.